As you may know, the challenge of global development has been one of my central preoccupations over the last 50 years. In striving to understand the lives of widely dispersed Ismaili communities, I have also become immersed in the lives of their host societies. And I have been joined in that immersion by the institutions of the Aga Khan Development Network and our 60,000 employees in more than 30 countries. Our experience, like yours, has been filled with both satisfactions and frustrations. Over these 50 years, the world has made enormous, indeed breathtaking progress in many areas. But often, where the needs are most urgent, our progress has been too slow. We have learned how to address particular symptoms of poverty. But unforeseen variables have diluted our impact. Perhaps most importantly, we have often failed to predict and to preempt tragic developments, such as famines and civil conflicts, even when they have been brewing over decades of despair. The recent economic crisis has deepened such problems, adding to the urgency of our mission. Time is therefore more of the essence than ever before. And unless we can markedly accelerate our performance, our tasks will be further multiplied. Confronting these challenges creatively and urgently is nothing short of a moral imperative. So the issue comes back: how do you translate international public will to support into effective action in the countries, the poorest countries of our world? That is the problem that we deal with every day in the Aga Khan Development Network. In fashioning our response, a heightened capacity for predicting risk and developing anticipatory responses will be critical. Predictability must become a key objective of our work. It is a science which deserves far more attention from the development community. I have no magical answers to offer, but I come to you this morning as one who has been watching and listening carefully in the developing world for a long time, and who has shared with my network colleagues a point of view which we describe as looking from the bottom up. Our experience in the field has encouraged us to focus on the complexities and subtleties of development, to think as pragmatically and holistically as possible, and to develop responses which are punctual, targeted, and replicable. I don't mean to shortchange the need for expanding financial resources and development, but a realistic assessment tells us that resource growth will be difficult. Indeed, we have learned recently, and regrettably, that government contributions have fallen short of the numbers that were pledged just 5 years ago. But even as we work to change that picture, we also have a special obligation to maximize the impact of whatever resources are at hand. And again, the question is, how do you do that in the field? And in order to do that, the first question I've asked is whether the nature of the development process itself has changed over time. I believe that it has. Let me explain this view by citing 5 principles which have grown out of our development experience. First, I would cite the rising importance of civil society, by which I mean those not-for-profit organizations which are driven by a public service agenda. Increasingly, I believe a cross-section of civil society players can be major engines for progress in developing societies, particularly when governments are underperforming. Secondly, I would underscore the growing potential of what some call PPPs, public-private partnerships. Such collaborations can tap the unique strengths of both sectors, overcoming outmoded dogmas which depreciate the role of the market-driven enterprises on the one hand, or which denigrate the capacities of publicly supported agencies on the other. Effective public-private partnerships must be genuinely participative, as committed leaders coordinate their thinking, sharing objectives, sharing strategies, sharing resources, sharing predictions. And this approach can be powerful, indeed very powerful, in the social and cultural development fields, not only in the more established economic one. A third guiding concept for our network, as for others, is what we call multi-input area development. The acronym is horrible. It's MIAD. But we use it a lot. Singular inputs alone will not do the job. Not in the time available, not across the wide spectrum of needs. But if we can work simultaneously and synergistically on several fronts, then progress in one area will spur progress in other areas. The whole can be greater than the sum of its parts. The fourth touchstone is the recognition that social diversity, the pluralism of peoples, is an asset, not a liability for the development process. Even as we address the complexities of development in one context, we must also differentiate more clearly among contexts. Impoverished peoples are more diversified than is sometimes appreciated. Some 70% of the world's poor live in rural environments where diversity, ethnic, religious, social, economic, linguistic, political, is like a kaleidoscope that history shakes every day. Often these local distinctions can provide valuable levers for long-term progress. Fifth and finally, I would mention what many call quality of life assessments, a more adequate way to measure the results of our work. Quite simply, we need to embrace a wider array of evaluative criteria, both quantitative and qualitative, elements which the poor themselves take into account when assessing their own well-being. As we measure outcomes with greater breadth, we will move beyond an excessive reliance on traditional categories, such as average productivity levels, or per acre yields, or per capita national product, or rates of population growth. Yes, these are all significant variables, but they come alive only as they transform the quality of daily living for the populations involved, in ways in which they and their children can see and value. This concern with quality assessments, of course, is not limited to the developing world. You may recall how President Sarkozy, speaking at the Sorbonne last September,